Welcome to another episode of Paranormal, the New Normal. Once again, I am your host, Jeremy, here trying to make the world seem a little more normal. Though these days, that's impossible, it seems. My guest tonight, though, she lives in the world of the unnormal, like the rest of us, and she deals with it on a daily basis, almost, I would imagine. My guest is Miranda Young from Ghost Biker Explorations, and also, funny enough, is a business partner of one of my first guests, Chris Wagner, which I'm glad to have her on today to talk about everything she does. How you doing tonight, Miranda?
I'm doing great, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, my pleasure. When you messaged me about what you do and that you wanted to come on the show, I was like, oh, I would not pass up on that any day of the week. So yes,
Oh,
gladly, gladly. So first things first, same question I asked everybody at the beginning of the show. What got you into the paranormal supernatural to begin with?
sure. So for me, I know a lot of investigators and stuff grew up in haunted houses and experienced things from young ages. But for me, I really kind of got into it from the storytelling aspect, the folklore, the local legends. I spent a lot of time with my grandmother, who she was 95 when she passed away. And she grew up in the Appalachian Mountains. And I spent a lot of time sitting on her porch listening to her tell stories about her time growing up there, as well as some of the local mountain haints and some of the different things that she experienced. She was very steeped in local legend and folklore. And she was one of those people that she could tell the weather based on the signs, as well as she knew when the first snowfall was going to come based on the first frost and that sort of thing. So she really instilled a lot of that, and that's really where I grew to love the paranormal. I took it from that storytelling side. My dad, he used to spend a lot of time taking me back roads riding and sharing stories about different areas of the community and how they used to be back, whenever they were a thriving, bustling town. Now they're essentially just ghosts of the past and old buildings that are no longer standing. So he shared a lot of those stories with me. And then I found that I loved it so much that I just spent a lot of time in the library trying to read books and stories about different hauntings in different areas. And of course, being a biker and loving to travel, I really like looking at those stories from different areas and then going and seeing if I can figure out whether these local legends and stories have any truth to them based on the paranormal research that we do.
Which that right there just sounds beautiful. I mean, that's a dream right there. I mean, Appalachia to begin with is just so full of so many paranormal creatures, to be legends of them, so much folklore. It's just an amazing place that I actually can't wait to visit one day. I've driven past it kind of. I never actually got to explore it.
Yeah, there's a whole lot in the area, and and that's the beautiful thing about all the different regions of the country is that they've all got very similar stories of hauntings, but they're all unique to those areas. And so Appalachia, I mean, it's very old. It's a very traditional group of people, and ones that depending on the mountain or the holler that you're in, the stories are a little bit different. And so there's a lot of them, and you could spend a lifetime just researching some of the stories just in this particular area. But that's to me, that's why I love it so much, because every area is different, whether you're up in New England or in the deep south or in Appalachia, or even out in the Ozarks or out west. Everything has a different story. And most of these small towns, it doesn't have to be a big commercial location. It can be, each of these small towns have got different stories about how they were developed and how they were created. And I love being able to share all of that on the show.
Yeah, I mean, the history of small town America is always interesting. It always is. And I mean, well, and yes, you named the Northeast. That's
Mhm.
where I'm located. So yeah, we got plenty of different folklore up here too,
Oh, yes.
especially in the Bridgewater Triangle area, but which is where my wife is from and where the house that I met her in is located. So I've had some creepy experiences over there, but
Oh, I'm sure.
yeah, but So my second question, I usually do, we're gonna get into that anyway, so I'm just gonna skip it for now because I know we're gonna hit it in a minute anyway. So ghost biker explorations. Just so do you guys are you paranormal investigators that people like hire or contact to come investigate, or is it just
No, it's just me. I'm the ghost biker, and so I started out investigating with a team about 15 years ago, and really cut my teeth with this group of guys on the team that I used to be a member of. We did a lot of residentials, we did a lot of commercial locations, but I found that with my job and just myself, I found that I was out always riding my motorcycle, going to different locations, really doing on my own a lot more urbexing. And so I would just take off on my motorcycle, go to these different locations that had some interesting stories, photograph them, put them on my social media, and people really started asking a lot of questions about those locations. And so I would put out there the stories behind them, and why I was there. And so I really got to thinking, why don't I document this through video? And so my background is in marketing and design as well as photography. And so I really sat down and created the brand, Ghost Biker Explorations. And it was really almost kind of a joke, because a lot of the time I was riding my motorcycle to different investigations that I was doing with the team. And I was talking to a good friend, and, said something about riding my motorcycle to one of the investigations we were going to. And I said, well, just call me Ghost Biker. And she was like, well, I would watch that. So I really kind of started thinking about it and thought I go out a whole lot on my own. These locations have really gotten a lot of attention. And, why not combine those two passions? And so of course my marketing wheels were spinning, and I designed my logo, designed the way that I wanted the episodes to be, and essentially ended up putting them out as a season rather than just releasing an episode as I do it. So I release a season or an episode every Tuesday night during the month of October. We're now on our fifth season. And usually it's either just myself filming vlog style, or I have a camera person with me that will follow me when I film. Really just depends on the location. Every now and then I do collaborations. I met my business partner through the paranormal when we went and investigated Henry River Mill Village in North Carolina. So I highlighted that on an episode. And then my friend Tiffany White, who's been a seasoned investigator for many many years, she does a lot of the darker locations that I go to. And so essentially it's just myself. And through Ghost Biker Explorations, I've been able to partner with Harley Davidson, and I do haunted motorcycle rides. We also do them there from the jail. And then I also have my season, as well as a weekly live stream that I do called Shop Talk Live from the Ghost Biker Garage, where I have different folks on the show and kind of break everything down with the locations I visit, or with what these investigators, podcasters, and such are doing out in the field.
sounds really interesting. I'm gonna have to check it out. I mean, it sounds I like small town history, so like I said, so that's definitely something right my alley, especially if there's a paranormal twist to it. Because
Absolutely.
small towns with
Yeah.
little paranormal twists, you gotta love. Hello,
Yeah, I was
Sean
gonna
Ellis.
say, for me, for the most part, I always tell people, because, the commercial locations are great. And, being a co-owner of one, obviously I want people to come and check that out. But I always tell a lot of folks, especially being a biker, it's not necessarily about the destination, but more about the trip there or the ride. And I always tell people, if you take a map, close your eyes and touch anywhere on that map, I guarantee that anywhere you touch, you're going to touch somewhere that's got some interesting story behind it. It may be a very small town. Like in the first episode, we highlighted the Bleeding Mausoleum in Cleveland, Tennessee. And this location, it's very small. It's very well known in the area, but once you get outside of Cleveland, it's not very well known. And so I always, highlight on the episode, I highlight the travel, I highlight the story as to why I'm there, and then the paranormal investigation, and I keep them between 20 to 40 minutes just to keep everyone's attention. And that's what I love doing about that, because a lot of people, highlighting these areas that a lot of people haven't heard of, or that we try to encourage people to go and visit.
Yeah, which that I mean, Cleveland, Tennessee, I never even heard of that town. It's when you first started saying Cleveland, I was like, "I'm like, alright, she's gonna say Ohio next." I'm like, "Wait a minute, what's this now? Tennessee?" But
Yeah, Cleveland,
so
Tennessee.
which I never even heard of that, but I mean, anywhere in Tennessee is always beautiful, but I've been through Tennessee. But so let me ask you this:
Okay.
what is the creepiest town you ever done a story in? Like, what was like? Have you ever done like a
Hmm.
Silent Hill type town or anything like that? Like an actual ghost town, possibly?
I've done several ghost towns. Probably one of the most interesting was that of Henry River Mill Village that I mentioned there at the very beginning, where I met Dr. Sumner. Henry River Mill Village is over in Hickory or Hildebrand, North Carolina, and it's an old mill town. The mill is actually no longer standing. It was destroyed by fire. However, the general store is still there. There's about 13 houses that are still standing, and they're continually working to fix these houses up. But it's a big property right there, and essentially, whenever the mill was in operation, it was its own town, and it was they had their own currency. They had it was very self-contained. Had really anything that you could want within that little town. And that's a very common thing when it comes to mill towns as well as mining communities here in the Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia area. I love doing those top locations because each of those little spots inside of the town has their own story and their own hauntings. So that was, it definitely wasn't the creepiest, but it was really interesting. And I believe I highlighted that one in season 3, episode 4. But to answer your question, as far as creepiest areas, I gotta say, probably the strangest locations I've ever covered have probably been in Indiana, and one would have to be Revenant Acres, which was there in Charlottesville, Indiana, and then the Willows Weep House, which is in Cayuga, Indiana. I'm not quite sure why, but it just seems like every location that I've done there in Indiana has kind of been a little odd, and a little bit creepier than some of the others.
Yeah, I mean, well, Indiana's out there in the Midwest, like the middle of nowhere, so it's kinda
Yeah.
I mean, things can exist out there without being seen or being talked about a lot because people out there tend to keep to themselves, so
Absolutely, and when you start looking at why would these locations be haunted, it's always been fascinated to me because, Indiana itself, when I started doing research, the first place I investigated out there was Revenant Acres, and I was fascinated by this story because it had such an extreme haunting and a darker haunting, but I didn't really know why. There was really no explanation as to why this house had this haunting that it did. And they had had several documented possessions out there, and it was said to not like women. And so thought, well, what a great place to go on a girls trip. So me and my friend Tiffany, we loaded up and we went up to Revenant Acres, had some very bizarre happenings there. And, come to find out, just looking at some of the history there in Indiana, the fact that you're right, these folks, they, even though it was very flat, unlike here in East Tennessee, people, they kinda kept to themselves. They were kind of, um, off to themselves, and when things happened, there were, in the early days, a lot of, they depended on their crops and such to do well, to sustain them. And so it was not uncommon very, very, very early on for essentially deals to be made, to try to increase rain or increase weather to yield better crops. And so there was a lot of dark things that kind of went on early on because of the nature of kind of making deals with the land and with the darker side to try to get rain and yield a better crop.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, people didn't know better than they, if you don't know who you're trying to, if you don't know who you're bargaining with, then you're gonna end up bargaining with the wrong person. That's basically the bottom line. And
Exactly.
we actually have a comment. Nando says that you need to come to the UK and do a few locations with them.
Yes, yes. I love Nando and Portal to the Paranormal. Those folks are just some class act, great individuals, wonderful team, and I hope to make it to the UK here. Hopefully maybe 2023 or 2024. And when I go, I definitely want to do some investigating with PTTP out there.
Yeah, I've had some people from the UK in this show, and just the story. I mean, it's old history. That's the thing.
Oh yeah,
It's the old history. It's America's kind of. I mean, yes, there's old history in America too. If you go talk to Native Americans, there's very old history, but dealing with the hairy tribes. But yeah, so I
yeah.
mean, but America is mostly from what most people talk about America is more modern history almost. It's like 400, 300 years, maybe 500 if you're lucky. But
Yeah.
so I love that everywhere else in the world has like this old thousands of years old history, and it's just so yeah. So I've heard some great experiences out of the UK from paranormal investigators. So, and I've seen a few on YouTube as well. They're interesting.
Yeah, amazing places to hit over there.
So, have you been all over the United States yet with Ghost Bike as a Ghost Biker, or have you still have places in the United States you're trying to get to?
Still got a lot of places that I'm trying to get to. For me personally, I have traveled all over the US. There's only, I think, 6 states that I haven't been in yet, and that would be the extreme, West. I definitely wanna hit Washington, Oregon, and California, but I have been all over, and as far as Ghost Biker, I haven't highlighted over for the most part right now being in the 5th season. I've highlighted mostly here in the South, in the Southeast, but yeah, hopefully be able to. And I mean, I have investigated all over as well. I just haven't highlighted them on the Ghost Biker series. I've been as far out west investigating as Colorado and New Mexico. But and then as far up north, I've investigated as far up north as Massachusetts. So
Oh,
hoping to extend some of that.
where in Massachusetts? Because that's where I live.
Yeah, so I was able to do the Lizzie Borden house. I did that,
Ah,
yeah, in 2019. That was part of kind of a whirlwind trip. Came up, investigated at Fort Mifflin, and then also the Lizzie Borden house. And then as I was going back, stayed at the Farnsworth there in Gettysburg, and headed on back down to Tennessee. So I was up there for the Lizzie Borden house. I've actually not highlighted it in episode yet, but it was a really good investigation, and I have it kind of in the archives to highlight very soon. Just haven't pulled out all that evidence yet.
yeah, I feel ashamed of myself because I live in Massachusetts and yet I've never checked out the Lizzie Borden house. Like, I mean, I've been in the woods of Freetown Forest and other areas around the Bridgewater Triangle because that's where my now wife lived when I
Hmm.
met her. But I mean, I mean, yeah. So I mean, I've done some investigating down there, like in the woods, like with my kids. Like, but I always keep an eye out for our old friend Squatchy, see if I can
Oh
find him.
yeah. Oh yeah. A lot up in that area. I know I spent a week in Boston back in 2018. And I tell you, one of my favorite places when I was there to just spend time at was there at the Boston Commons. And
Yes.
I loved it because every morning I got up and I ran, and then I would come back in the evenings, and just hearing the stories, because you're in this place that it's this big park and this big area, but then to actually kind of find out the darker history about it, of the hangings that took place there and the bodies that was buried there in the park whenever they were doing the subway system, and they had to go through and remove these bodies. Just a very interesting history on this place that has a much lighter family friendly feel. And I was really found myself really fascinated by the commons when I was there.
Yeah, I've been to I actually, well, until I recently got a manager position, I used to actually do a work in Boston like once in a while, like merchandising. And So I've been all over Boston multiple times, and I always enjoy spending the day there. It's just such a it's a nice town. I mean,
It is.
there's some parts you don't want to spend the day in, but there's a lot of parts you would. I mean, and I spent we've done like a long day in Salem before as well, and done
Yes.
the witch tours and whatnot. It's all fun. Like, and the history of Salem alone is just
Oh
the
my
whole witch
gosh.
the witch trial history is just so rich, and supposedly you can see things if you're there overnight. Like you could see there's certain things that get like basically happen every other night or so.
Yeah,
So
I was there for a day trip. That week that I was up there, it was so much fun. I was up there over 4th of July week there in 2018, and I thought, "What a great place to spend 4th of July there in Boston," and, spent a lot of time there in actual Boston proper, but then, took a day trip down to Lizzie Borden, and then, of course, when I investigated it, I came back, it was a year later, came back and actually did the investigation. And then spent a day in Salem, spent a day in Martha's Vineyard. Just that entire area was just so much fun because, again, talking about old history in comparison to us down here in the South, that's definitely some much older history. And when you start getting into the witch trials and stuff, I mean, just amazing the things that everybody doesn't really know about that place, until you get in there and really start diving into the history and learning more about really what was going on there in Salem.
yeah, I mean, yeah, and you said Martha's Vineyard too, right?
Yes.
I mean, Martha's Vineyard is gorgeous. I we went there on we were staying in Cape Cod for a weekend with the kids, and we went to Martha's Vineyard for a day. Took the
Yeah.
ferry over, but it's a nice little. We made the biggest mistake though. We got off the we didn't know the island at all, so we got off the ferry at the wrong side of the island,
Ah.
and instead of getting on the free buses that take you to the main part of the island where all the attractions are, we walked like
Whew.
5 miles
Yeah.
across the whole island with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old.
Ooh.
Yeah, talk about rough exploration. But
Right?
I ended up carrying I forget if he was 3 or 4. Actually, yeah, he was 3 because that was when we first started dating. But yeah, I ended up carrying the 3-year-old through the whole island basically because after a while his legs just couldn't go anymore. I was like, fine. It's just
Oh.
it was a bad start to a day, but it got better towards the end of the day. But a hundred,
You learned quick.
yeah, yeah. And next time we go there, we now know go to the go to the port on the side where all the attractions are and where the merry-go-round is and all that. So yeah, definitely. But some good restaurants there, that's for sure. The dinner made up for it. Some of the seafood restaurant I went to was freaking amazing. But
Oh, the seafood there in New England, I love it. I mean, it's second to none there in that area. Love it.
so have you said you went to New Mexico. I meant to ask earlier. Did you go to Roswell?
I didn't. So I was actually in New Mexico speaking at the the first annual Las Cruces Paracon, and so unfortunately, it was kind of a quick trip. I was there, I think, for 3 days. Spoke to, and I guess technically from the flight in and the flight out, I was there for 4 days, but it was a 2-day convention. And was right there in Las Cruces. Got to go to the old Donna Anna courthouse and jail there, and just walking through that jail, they're in the process of converting it into a 4-star hotel, I believe, but they're going through fixing it up and keeping some of the stuff as it is, but really changing a lot of it from this old jail and courthouse. And it's pretty amazing because they're allowing paranormal investigations right now during the process. So we were able to go in there, but it was just a taste of what's in the area, and I wish I'd been able to go to Roswell while I was out there because that's been one of those places I've always wanted to go and check out.
Yeah, yeah, I never been out west really at all, but Roswell is definitely on my bucket list of places I want to go just because that's where it all started, technically, according to, well, in modern history at least. I
Yeah.
mean, if you want to go back ancient history, you got to go to Egypt or you got to go to uh, where the Aztecs were. I forget the name of the country at the moment, but I want to say Peru, but
Yeah,
I
I
could be
think
wrong.
so. Yeah. No, I mean, you're exactly right. We had a lot of people that because there's a lot of military bases right around in there. And so we got a lot of military folks that came to the convention and just stopped by the booth, was talking and, listened to the presentations and talked to us. And several people who had been to Roswell and they were sharing their stories of different things they had experienced. And then I was really amazed by the different things that some of the folks who were on some of the bases had experienced, and a couple of them actually talked about some of the different bases that they had, been at when they'd been stationed around the world, and just fascinating conversations from these military folks that were in the area, and some different experiences that I had never heard of before until, I was there in, New Mexico.
Yeah, actually, I believe I'm working on getting my friends over at uh oh my god, he's gonna kill me for forgetting it. My friend AJ, he's trying to get me hooked up with someone in their show who is the grandson of one of the people who found the Roswell crash.
Oh, okay.
Talking with the Source, yeah, that's the name of the podcast he does. Sorry, AJ, I screwed that up, but I mean, yeah. So if I can get him as a guest, I'll be very excited because that's a conversation I definitely want to have. So,
Absolutely.
have you done any cryptid investigations by chance? Like, I, I mean, we all know the big guy Sasquatch, but any of the smaller ones even?
Not very much. I did do a little bit while I was at Octagon Hall in Franklin, Kentucky. That's one of those locations that it's kind of got the trifecta. They've got UFO activity, they've also got cryptid activity, and then they've got a lot of paranormal activity. My focus has primarily been on the paranormal, so I haven't really done a whole lot of cryptid research. However, I've had a lot of people who do cryptid research on my show that's really kind of caused me to gain an interest in it because again, when you start looking at all these different areas around the country, there's so many different areas that you can explore when it comes to cryptids just in the southeast itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's well, if you want to go, well, in the southeast alone, I would definitely be riding through the Everglades looking for some skunk ape. But
Yes. Yes.
and I mean, of course, you always gotta look for the gators because that's the best part about going to Florida is trying to see if you can find a gator. Which
Florida's and anacondas. Anacondas are bad down there now.
are they? Oh, yeah.
Oh
I
yeah, in the
snakes are thing.
Everglades.
Snakes are something I avoid with a like a harsh against snakes. Like, no, I'm good.
Yeah, they're
But
huge down there. It's crazy because several people who had them as pets ended up
yeah,
releasing them down there, and then they just multiplied. I think they actually have a season where you can go down there and hunt anacondas just to try to thin them out because they've gotten so rampant down in the Everglades.
yeah. There's a show they just did about that on Peacock. I forget what it's called, but it's got the guy from The Office on it, Craig something, and he like it's about like python hunting season. It's hilarious. I love it. But and yeah, I mean, yeah, I watch a show about professionals, so that's all they do is they take care of like snake problems down there. And like
Mhm.
I hate snakes, but I can still watch it on TV. I can't explain that. But yeah, it's becoming a real issue down there. And but I would say, I mean, if you want to go somewhere creepy for a ride, the land between the lakes up in Wisconsin. I just had
Ah,
on I just had on DA Roberts a couple weeks ago, the North American Dog Man. Oh my God,
yes.
Patrol, NADP. I think it's Patrol. I could be wrong, but like he's done some investigating in Land Between the Lakes, and it is terrifying. Like for part of it, when you first get there, part of it there you see roadkill, you see wild animals running around. You get to the second part of it, you see nothing. There's no
Wow.
roadkill, there's no animals. Like something is in those woods, and that just I mean, experienced hunters and fishermen will not go to that part of Land Between the Lakes because
Huh.
they fear what's there.
Wow.
I mean, he said he had a few experiences. I don't want to give too much away because I want people to listen to that episode when it releases in a couple weeks. But it's just, I mean, that's my personal favorite cryptid, dogmen. Like that's my personal favorite cryptid
I'll
because
definitely have to add that to the list.
Yeah, because I mean, they're like Sasquatch almost because they've been around. Stories of them have been around since the beginning of time, basically. So it's interesting, and also it's where werewolves supposedly came from. The idea of werewolves. So, but any any I any ideas of wanting to go to Alaska or Hawaii and do some investigating?
Oh, I would love to do that, especially go to Alaska. I've read some of the different, stories about the Alaskan Triangle and just about some of the activity up there. Just from like the gold rushes alone. I would love to hit the Gold Rush Trail that starts there in the Oregon Washington area and cuts up through Canada all the way up to Alaska, and essentially follow that, stopping at different landmarks and doing investigating. I think that that would be, I mean, because those guys were so tough, and some of the different things that they experienced just trying to get out there and to change their way of life and exploring this area. I think Alaska would just be an amazing place to investigate. Hawaii would too, because I mean, there's a lot of different stories about that, but Alaska would definitely be a dream.
Yeah, Alaska's more the creepy place that
Yeah,
like the last fringes of darkness still could be because it's just so unpopulated and so unexplored. Even I mean,
absolutely.
I know Small Town Monsters just went up there about 6 months ago to do like their newest big finding Bigfoot documentary, but Hawaii, I mean Hawaii, Hawaii, you got all the old legends of like
Yes.
forest spirits and whatnot. So it's interesting. It's a lot of old god type stuff, which
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a huge mythology fan slash somewhat a buff, and I love like the old gods. To me, there's something to that, whether they're
Mhm.
extraterrestrial in origin or they actually were old gods. Like I don't know. I'm not a religious person, so I don't try to ponder on it too often, but sometimes I have to.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, that goes with that totally different hauntings around the country, 'cause, like you said, that with Alaska, just the fact that you're in complete darkness for what, 6 months out of the year, or not complete, but it's dark almost all day and all night, for, 6 months, and then when you get up, because it's a totally unexplored area in some places. But then, yeah, Hawaii, I mean, it's totally different in that instance. I mean, it's almost like kinda getting into more of like with our Native American stuff, you have more of the tribes and the old gods, and, I think, like the Polynesian people, they have their own stories and legends and origins relating just to their area. So, it would be a very unique place. I can honestly say I don't know a whole lot about, other than some of the different stories about the forest and the volcanoes and such. I don't know as many of their local legends as I do in other areas of the country, but it'd be absolutely fascinating to get to go.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of stories about people who go to Hawaii and they take like a piece of like a rock from like a volcano back with them, and then it's like Robert the Doll. All of a sudden, they're cursed because they took it. So
I'd
it's
believe
just
that.
it's. I mean, there's a lot of same as Robert the Doll. There's in the museum there. There's a lot of apology notes hanging on the wall from people with they sit back with the rocks. But like I straight up have heard stories of people's houses burning down and stuff like that, like getting violently like getting sick to the point of like cancer and everything because they took a rock from the island. And I mean, you should always respect what's there and not take it. It's not yours to take. But
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm sure at the gift shop you could buy one. I'm sure they have ones there that they deem safe to take. But
Probably. And then, of course, you've got different, different relics and different stuff, that, there's always stories that it's like if you take something along those lines that are essentially cursed. I always find those fascinating, that, those different stories like that from the area.
I mean, yeah, the whole King Tut type story where like anybody who goes into the tomb and tries to take something is getting basically going to be killed eventually by something.
Mhm.
I mean, we just did that on my other paranormal discussion show, Global Strangers. We just did an episode on curses as part of our countdown to Halloween, and of course we'd bring up the King Tut one and a bunch of other ones. But it's it's a fun topic. It always is.
Oh,
Which
absolutely.
So, have you had any experiences like actually like like with spirits, with aliens, anything really?
I've had a lot with spirits, just because I mean it's what I go seeking out. I can't really say I've had anything much when it comes to aliens, UFOs, that sort of thing, but a lot with spirits, and I mean a lot of that started from when I was a kid. My elementary school was haunted, and again, my one of the things that got me into it, my librarian, she was amazing at sharing stories, and the story about the murder that took place there at the high school between a local deputy who was there. They were showing a movie there at the college, or excuse me, at the elementary school there in 1927, and the local deputy, he had gone in to serve a warrant. They were showing a comedy. He was actually drunk. He was there serving a warrant on some moonshiners, and he was drunk himself, ended up shooting the local doctor that was there, as well as his fellow deputy that was there on duty. And so, they did after a while, they did end up closing up the top of the high school there, or excuse me, the elementary school where they showed the movies, and you could still see the bullet holes there in the wall, but they didn't have classes in there. And so that was one of those stories. You could hear phantom laughing, you could hear what sounded like a phantom movie playing, as well as different shadow figures on that floor of the elementary school. And so, all of that really kinda started from a young age, with my fascination with it, and on some of these different locations that I've traveled to and investigated, I've seen shadow figures, captured some amazing disembodied voices with Class A EVPs, and, experienced some really interesting residual and intelligent hauntings throughout my travels at some of these different locations.
Well, let me ask you this then, because you mentioned shadow people.
Mhm.
What do you have any theories on what you think they are?
Uh, I definitely think that they are spirits or entities. I think that different spirits that we make communication with. I don't believe that shadow figures are evil or anything of that nature. I know some people tend to believe that that is a darker entity. From my experience, I don't believe that to be the case. I think that spirits can manifest themselves in many different ways. Some just take more energy than others. I heard Mike Ricksecker give a very, very interesting theory. He's done some extensive studies on shadow figures, and his was essentially talking about your vibration level, and that sometimes people see things based on the vibration level that they're able to match. And so I really kind of that theory made sense to me, but also one that really kind of made sense was that when you're looking at something, sometimes our eyes are not able to really comprehend completely what we're seeing, as far as like seeing in different spectrums. And so I heard a theory one time that it was someone who had a loved one pass away. She had seen this vision, and in her vision, there were these four shadow figures standing around her mother's bed while she was getting ready to pass away. And, they weren't, when you hear that, you tend to think, "Oh, there's these dark figures standing around," but actually, they were light figures. It's just the eye couldn't see all of the colors and see everything that was there, and it was seeing it as dark. So, I tend to think it's just a way of manifesting, as well as our inability to be able to see exactly what we're experiencing, or what we're truly experiencing.
See, I've had this theory for a long time that shadow people are basically like middle-aged spirits, kind of like because I have a theory that when people die, they become if they become spirits, depending on what you believe in or what happens to them,
Mhm.
then when they start off, they're just like a fog, like almost like a mist, because they don't know how to shape themselves into anything corporal yet. But I believe that the next form they could take is a shadow person. because they're learning how to make themselves look human, but they can't do like a full body apparition yet because they don't know enough how to do that yet. So
I can understand that. Yeah.
that's always been my theory, kind of.
Mhm.
And I mean, I had Lon Strickler, who's a paranormal investigator from Pennsylvania, on here, and he says he disagreed with me though because he says he worked with families who had shot people in their house,
Mhm.
and that the shot people will suck all the like they'll make a family fall apart. Like they suck all the energy out of the house, like anything positive they take out of the house. Like they families parents will get divorced, like kids will start acting up, like it'll take down a whole house if they're infested with shadow people.
I've heard different people say negative things. I tend to disagree with that. That you know, I don't believe that all shadow figures are dark or evil. I think that that's kind of a common misconception that people will have, that something that's dark is dark, evil. You have to take it on a case by case basis. Now, within those homes he investigated, they may have had some very negative activity that caused the people to, you know, marriages to fall apart and things to sort of disintegrate before your eyes. But from experiences I've had and from different ones that I've, you know, talked to different people that have experienced, that's not always been the case, that it's just a form of manifestation, and that's the way that that particular entity or spirit has been able to manifest. And in some instances it is, you know, it's like when you start thinking about color, and you know, black is all color combined. So
Yeah.
you know, so there's just certain things based on the rods and cones in our eyes that we can't physically see on certain spectrums. Certain animals can see on different spectrums. You know, I mean, that's a scientifically proven fact. So to me, like I said, it makes sense that our mind is not able to fully comprehend some of the things that we see, and that's how we see them are dark masses.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, and just like Sasquatches and
Yeah.
everything else out there, there's good and there's bad. Like I've heard of Sasquatches that, well, are just humane, like almost humane. Like they live in your property for 50 years and they will never bother you. They'll never
Mhm.
try to come after you or throw things at you. They as long as you leave them alone, they leave you alone. But
Yeah.
then again, there are the Sasquatches who attack trucks and who attack people because they just don't want anybody around them because they're, I don't know, angry at humans or something, or just
Yeah.
their temper. That's just their temper.
Yeah, I mean, it's like people, you know,
Exactly.
if we believe that what we're dealing with were once human, um, you know, there's different, you know, we connect with different people. There's people we like talking to. You know, I feel like it's the same in the spirit world, that just because a spirit doesn't communicate with me, it doesn't mean the location's not haunted. It doesn't mean that that's a mean spirit or whatever. They may just not wanna connect with me. They may be having an off day, or I may be having an off day with the energy that I bring into the location. Um, you know, the spirits that we have there at the jail, you know, we're dealing with um, these these people who were not, you know, some of them committed evil acts in their human life. Some, you know, for whatever reason, you know, whether they were in there because of something they did, or self defense or what have you, we're dealing with people who were in there for not so good reasons. So some of the entities we're dealing with, they may not be the nicest. Are they negative? No, they're at the jail, but they may. I mean, it is a jail, and so so I think you kind of have to take everything on a case by case basis. And that's where I'm always fascinated when you look at people who study Sasquatch or study shadow people, and they really do these extensive studies and dive in deep. You know, I would be interested. We have a lot of shadow people at the jail. We've caught several of them on camera. We've caught several of them on video, and it's always interesting to me to find out what some of these other folks are experiencing whenever they see shadow people and deal with them. And you just kind of have to look at the type of haunting you have and everything that's going on and compare it to other places as well, because no two places are the same. And it just really helps in the research to be able to do that.
And actually, that's a good segue right there because I was actually gonna make sure we had enough time at the end here to talk about Scott County Jail because I know you are that's where you're based out of, is it not?
It is. It is. So, yeah, we opened the historic Scott County Jail in September of 2021. My business partner, who is with Soul Sisters Paranormal, we came together. We created a company, History, Highways, and Haunts, and we opened up the jail as a true crime museum during the day and a paranormal research center in the evenings and during the night. And to date, I believe we've had just right at 75 paranormal investigators that are there or that's come and investigated. And, um, people, I mean, it's an active location.
So, just for people who don't know, what's the history behind this prison?
Sure. So the jail was opened in 1904. It was in operation until 2008. And during that time, the jail had a capacity to hold right about 50 inmates. We did have issues with overcrowding over the years. And so with overcrowding comes, violence and its own, issues with that. A lot of the
Yeah.
early inmates were moonshiners. And so we've had everything from stories about some of the more famous moonshiners that have been in there. We did have a sheriff who was killed right outside the front door. He was a Baptist preacher. He was also took a very, very hard stance on the moonshining in the area. He was killed while he was bringing in a moonshiner. He had been warned his life could be in danger if he pursued the abolition of or the abolishment of moonshine. And so he did it anyways. The moonshiners made good on it. And to this day, that's actually still one of Scott County's unsolved murders. This guy, he was 6'8", and, we do see a very, very tall shadow figure around certain areas of the jail that tends to respond to a lot of targeted questions when we're asking about Sheriff Ellis. We also down here, we also have something called Backwoods Justice. And so we've had several different inmates, 7 in particular, who have been taken from the jail via mob mountain justice and
Hmm.
lynched or murdered within the property or the surrounding areas of the property. So some of those inmates, we have been able to make contact with some of those who were taken from the jail. And then those are probably some of the most famous stories. But with inside the walls, we get a lot of residual activity, everything from doors slamming, some incredible footsteps that we do believe, it's on the jailer's walk. We do believe that that is kind of a residual haunting from past jailers and sheriffs who would patrol around the jailer's walk. And shadow figures, disembodied voices. We've got a lot of trigger items within those walls because we've got different artifacts as well as articles up there, and some of those are trigger items that does trigger some specific activity. We've been able to actually validate a lot of what we've captured from ourselves and other investigators through different historical research, which has actually been really just amazing for me because we're able to go back and some different teams have gotten names that we've been able to go back and through our research find and validate through history.
Yeah, I mean that's yeah, because I mean jails, I mean all the nation are known for being like haunted if they're closed if they've been closed, even if they're not closed down, they're still open. They're still
Yeah.
you'll hear from the prisoners in there now. I'm guessing the mob justice down there is more like the despicable criminals, the ones who do horrible things that they just want to get rid of.
Uh, Not necessarily. I mean, for the most part, that was the case. In this particular instance, one of the cases in particular, Jerome Boyett and Harvey Winchester, they were in there for unrelated crimes. Jerome Boyett was 21 years old. Harvey Winchester was around 17. Harvey had been in jail for a few months longer than Jerome, but Jerome Boyett had actually killed one of the neighboring sheriffs. Him and his brother were in a train car, and there had been a call that there was a disturbance, disturbing the peace. And so we believe it was actually because of moonshine, a moonshine feud. But
Yeah.
because this had taken place in 1933. And so the sheriff, Sheriff Winningham, George and Floyd Winningham to be exact, they were dispersed to the scene. And whenever they approached Jerome and his brother, there became a shootout. Depending on which family you're a member of, depends on who shot first. But during that shootout, Jerome Boyett did end up, he said it was an accident, but that he killed Sheriff George Winningham, or Floyd Winningham, and his son George. And so he took off on the run. And while he was gone, a posse, the sheriff's family created a posse. They went to Jerome Boyett's dad's house and asked him to give up Jerome. He wouldn't give him up, and so they ended up hanging him. And so Jerome found out, and they really did a lot to try to get Jerome to not find out that his dad had been killed, because they knew he would turn himself in. And if he turned himself in, he wouldn't get a trial. He wouldn't get his, due diligence. But he did turn himself in. He was in the jail for 8 days, and he did share a cell with Harvey Winchester. Like I said, Harvey was a young guy. He just happened to get drunk, got a little unruly, essentially was out kind of shooting at the moon one night. And uh, sheriff and a guy that he had just deputized came to arrest Harvey. Harvey ended up killing them. So essentially, both of these guys, even though it was unrelated crimes, they were essentially cop killers. And so they were in the cell. And on Jerome Boyett's 8th day in there, a mob of 25 people busted in, and they took both him and Harvey Winchester out, and brutally executed them. So regardless of, what side of the fence you're on in what happened, they were taken out. One of the other guys, he was taken out. He had killed an individual, and then the guy's wife testified against him. He was acquitted, and he ended up killing her. So he killed 2 people, and he had been brought into the jail. And after a certain period of time, a group of 50 people busted in, took him out, and hung him. So in some cases, there were some pretty heinous crimes. In others, it really just depended who you talk to, but it was a pretty common thing in some of these small rural county jails to have this backwoods or mountain vigilante justice. They just didn't feel like the court system was moving fast enough. So they took it upon themselves and would get a group together and overtake the jailer and the jailer's family, and come in, take them out, and string them up.
Yeah, I mean, it's that old world justice, kind of like that
Hmm.
that settler justice, but it worked.
Yeah,
But I don't want. Well, you have a show to go do pretty soon. I'm thinking, right?
I do.
So
I do.
so I don't want to keep you any longer. I don't want to make it go from one show to another like that. So why don't you tell people where they can find your show, where they can find you, and sell yourself, basically.
Absolutely. So we are just wrapping up season 5 of Ghost Biker Explorations. We this season we highlighted all haunted jails, and so you can go back and watch all of those episodes, as well as any of the past seasons, on the Ghost Biker Explorations Facebook page, Ghost Biker Explorations YouTube channel, and also www.ghostbikerexplorations.com. And tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, we do what we call Behind the Screams, where we go in and talk about the past episode that was just released. We still have one episode left of this season, the big season finale, which will be this coming Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. You can also check out what's going on at the Historic Scott County Jail on the Historic Scott County Jail Facebook page, YouTube channel, or the website at www.historicscottcojail.com.
Well, I thank you, and I thank you for coming on, Miranda. It's been a very enlightening talk. Very good discussion. So, all my listeners know where they can find me. Be sure to check me out next time. I believe I'll be back again on not Monday because it's Halloween, and if I record on Halloween, my wife will kill me. But I'll be back, I believe, on Tuesday or Wednesday. Wednesday, most likely, I believe. So I will see all my listeners then. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you again, Miranda, for coming on. Ghost Biker Exploration, people, check it out. It sounds very interesting. I'm definitely going to be watching some of that on YouTube later. So
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
my pleasure, and have a good night, everybody.